no matter where you're calling from. We want to welcome you guys. My name is Jenny Karr. I'm the coaching manager here at Tailored Fundraising, and co-leading with me today is one of our coaches, MaryAnne Ashley, calling in from Dublin. And behind the scenes, we have two more coaches helping us out, John Mark Purdue and Susie Berner. We are excited to be with you guys and are looking forward to the next hour, where we're going to look at newsletter components, content, do's and don'ts. All right, so what should you do? What should you stay away from? We're also going to look at tips for creating a plan for consistent newsletters. You know, that's something that all of us struggle with, is having that consistency. So we're going to kind of talk through some tips on how you can help make sure you're setting aside time to make that consistent. And throughout the webinar, we want to hear from you. In the Zoom screen, you're going to see that chat button. If you haven't found it already, this is where you can put any comments that you want to share throughout the webinar. A lot of times people might think of a resource that's helpful, so feel free to share any of that stuff. Just again, please make sure you've selected to all panelists and attendees in that little blue drop down so everyone can see it. The other button I want to draw your attention to is Q&A. If at any time you have a question, please put your question in the Q&A box. If you put in the chat, it can easily get lost. So all questions, please put in the Q&A box. But this is a live webinar where we can all learn from each other. So ask as many questions as you can think of. We're going to do our best to get through all of them, either live, or Susie may respond to them via text in that Q&A box. So just keep your eyes on that. We are also going to be giving a few poll questions throughout to get feedback around what your experience has been working with newsletters. Also, for those of you who have not experienced a coaching session with Tailored, we're offering a free session to get feedback on an existing newsletter. So all you have to do is click on the link in the chat that'll be there from Susie, fill out that form, upload your newsletter. We want to have that in advance. And then Susie's going to reach out and set up a session to walk you through specifics of what you can do to make your newsletter even better. So click on that link.
Yeah, so right off the bat, we want to start with a poll question. So what type of newsletter do you send? Is it paper, like through the mail? Is it email? Both? Neither? Or you just haven't started yet?
And we are, sorry, just heads up, there's something up with our polls. They may not gotten listed. So if you guys can just answer in the chat. So MaryAnne, if you can just read those again and just ask people to put their answers in the chat.
Sure. Yep, no problem. Okay, so what type of newsletter do you send? Put it in the chat. So is it paper, email, both, neither, or you haven't started yet? Oh my goodness.
I'm laughing at Adair's answer. He's like, no clue what I'm doing. No worries. That's why you have a coach, right?
Oh goodness,
Your
lots
coach
of
is gonna
both.
help you with that. Yeah.
A lot of both, a lot of email. Email, MailChimp. Yeah, I would say, what do you think? A lot of mostly email and both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's good.
So our primary focus today is going to be on email newsletters, but many of these tips and ideas will help you in your physical newsletters as well. One question we are hearing more frequently is, are newsletters even relevant anymore? And the short answer is yes. Usually people are asking this because they say no one responds when I send them out. That is because newsletters are viewed as one-way communication. The lack of response doesn't mean people aren't reading them and that no one cares. We've just created a culture where you send a newsletter to update the other person and not engage with them. And honestly, no matter how many times you end your newsletter with, and I'd love to hear how you're doing, or let us know how we can be lifting you up, you aren't likely to get a response because it's a mass communicated item. So if you're looking for interaction, then you need to be on social media and need to have a plan for connecting with people one-on-one. An effective communication plan that promotes sustainability includes all of these avenues. We've had separate webinars that focus on social media and one-on-one communication. The goal of this webinar is to complete the communication trifecta by helping you write an effective newsletter. So what takes a newsletter from just okay to, wow, I can't wait to read that? we are going to go over the 7 components of a great newsletter. The first newsletter component is the first thing people are going to see, and that's the subject line. People receive so many emails these days that you need to make sure that your readers want to open and read your newsletter as soon as they see it. It needs to scream, "Read me now." If people think, "I'll read that later," and skip over your email, 90% of the time they're not going to get it before they receive another batch of emails, and it will just get deleted. So make it catchy and maybe even humorous so they'll want to open it right away. Here are some real examples from people we've worked with that we've enjoyed. Making Rome our home. Mexico, the Cliff Notes version. Can you believe it? And checking in with the Smiths. The second component to think through is your banner, or the bar across the top of your newsletter. It can include the title and or a tagline, and can be a simple title like "Stories from Outside the Box," or "Walk Upon the Water." Or they can include a tagline like "The Karr's Whisper, After the Wind, a Fire Came, a Whisper of Grace." Or "Living Life on Mission, Updates, Prayer, and Stories with Andrew and Mary Ava Phillips." Including a banner and possibly a tagline gives you a consistent brand that makes you unmistakably recognizable. So feature it prominently at the top of every letter. The third component is the main story. And this is the meat of the letter, where we see newsletters have the most potential to go off the rails. If you want people to be excited about opening and reading your newsletter, keep it as focused and simple as possible, with ideally 1 story per newsletter. We'll go into much more detail on this in a bit. The next component, if you choose to have them, is updates. Did you share something in your last newsletter that you need to give an update on? Don't leave people hanging. Let them join you in celebrating or mourning or continuing to remember. But it's not necessary for every newsletter to have an update section. And the next component is a common one. It's prayer requests. So now, while this is common, we actually suggest keeping it really short, which isn't as common as we'd like, as in 2 to 3 requests, with at least one of those being focused on the ministry and not just you. If you find yourself having an extensive list of requests, which we all have those seasons, consider creating a separate space that you can link to from your newsletter, or sending an email with just requests. Keeping it separate allows you to keep your main newsletter shorter, which increases the chance people will read it. The 6th component to think through are your visuals. 65% of the population consists of visual learners. Therefore, without visuals that are engaging and creative, you are reaching less than half of your audience. It is also said that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so including 2 to 3 photos or a short video clip is a great strategy to get people's attention and hopefully connect with their hearts. Again, we'll go into more of this later. And the last component to look at with an email newsletter is links. These provide opportunities for people to connect in other ways. Include icons for social media, your contact info, and a button that links to your specific giving URL. They can also be used to take them to platforms that share more of the story you are sharing, like your blog or your website, or to other articles or websites that relate similar information. Now, the percentage of people who actually click through is really, really low. It's like usually just 10% of the people who even open the email to begin with. But it is a great way to give those who are interested in learning more a place to do so without getting in the way of the other 90% who just want to read a simple newsletter.
So let's jump into another poll question. And this is for those of you who use an email service that tracks what your open rate is, like MailChimp. All right, so what is the open rate of your email newsletters? Meaning, what percentage of people actually open your email? Maybe you don't know, that's fine. But for those of you who do know, go ahead and put in there for us what percentage. So you've got A is 76 to 100%. Thank you, Susie, for putting that in the chat. Yeah, so any of that window, what percentage are you seeing? Right off the bat, those are awesome numbers.
Yeah.
You guys may not feel that
Huge.
way, but those are amazing numbers.
Yeah.
35% so far is the lowest, 25%, 60. Yeah, that's great. The average open rate for MailChimp is 21%. So if you're above that number, you're already way better than the average. So congratulations on that. But that doesn't mean we can't still do work to make it better. The next point we want to make is probably the most important one. We want our communication to focus on what the Father is doing, the impact he is having on people's lives, including our own, right? So what is the Father doing? Let's have that be the focus of our newsletter. If you've been coached by us or been on any webinars we've hosted, you know that words like partnership and impact are part of our DNA. We're trying to reshape a culture by helping people view fundraising and being a ministry worker differently. And that difference starts with us, with how we see the Father, ourselves, and our partners. We see countless newsletters that are written basically about the ministry worker, what they have accomplished. And we've all done this and often don't even realize it. We want to challenge you to see yourself not as the sole person doing the work, but as the leader who is shepherding your team towards the work of the Son. When the Apostle Paul is writing to the Philippians, he's communicating the significance of their role, even though they're not there in person. He says things like, because of your partnership in the good news. And it's not the gift that I seek, but the fruit that increases to your credit. He's taking himself out of it and connecting the partner directly to the work that's being done. He's regularly bringing them into that blessing. So that's what we want to do. We want to create that narrative that focuses on the Father, because we're creating a narrative whether we want to or not. And our level of intentionality around our narrative directly relates to how inspired and how involved the reader is going to feel. Think of any inspiring leader. They're not usually inspiring because they talk about how amazing they are or how exciting their lives are. They're inspiring because of the vision they want to see and the way they bring other people together to be a part of that vision. Do your newsletters show readers who you are and what you can do, or are they seeing what the Father is doing and how they're a part of it through your partnership? Let's make sure it's the latter.
So a fun test I like to walk people through is the me versus we test. I'll have them take a look at their last or drafted newsletter and count up every time they say I, me, or my, or we or us if you're talking solely about your immediate family. And compare that with the number of times they reference the Father or Son. Who is being acknowledged more? Is there a good balance? Can you shape the narrative to make the Father the hero of the story with you and your partner being supporting characters? So this doesn't mean that you never say I or me, but just reference yourself as little as possible. Reframe things in the light of what the Father is doing. So for example, someone might say, I got the opportunity to visit the orphanage last week and be a part of leading one of the kids to the Son. The Father is so amazing. Now, this sounds really beautiful, but when we can take ourselves out of the picture, it gives us more opportunity to give the Father the credit and think about connecting our partners to the work. For example, last week at the orphanage, a kid accepted the Son into their life. The Father is so amazing. Thank you for your partnership in changing lives. So we were able to reframe it so that it doesn't say I even once, and it highlights the work the Father is doing and how partners are directly a part of that impact. If you don't work hard at including your partner and giving the Father glory, then by default, you're going to exclude them and make it all about yourself, even though you don't mean to. Another is to include powerful stories. These can be as simple as stories that paint a picture of the culture, like a moment of buying food from a street vendor, or stories that show the heartbreaking struggle you're seeing, like when a mom sells her 4-year-old daughter for drug money, or maybe stories of life transformation, like the moment a room full of new members are baptized and the celebration afterward. And make sure your stories are of specific moments. People are drawn into the stories of moments because it's easier to imagine themselves there with you when they can describe one scene at a time. So keep stories between about 200 to 400 words. 200 words or about 20 lines is where you'll get the most people reading the whole thing. But sometimes you have a rich story that requires a bit more detail, and that's okay too, as long as it's engaging. But more than 400 words is where you're going to start to lose people. If you're interested in becoming a better storyteller, next month's webinar is actually an interactive workshop specific to storytelling, and it has limited seating. So sign up today via the link. Susie's going to put it in the chat right now. Yep, she just did. So yeah, that'll be a great workshop. Go ahead and sign up for that. Another content do is write like you are writing to one person. Writing to one person makes it more personal. Instead of saying to the masses, thank you to all of our partners, communicate directly to the one reading, thank you for your partnership. Even if their partnership is just reading your newsletters, like they're not financial partners, consider them all a part of the work. Use media such as photos. Ideally, a newsletter will have between 1 to 3 pictures. Remember, your newsletter should be really focused, so 3 should be plenty. Here are a couple of tips for photos to ensure they're super engaging. Try to get action shots that tell a story. So instead of taking a posed picture of your attendees before they leave a weekly study, take a picture of them having a discussion during the study, and write captions that are meaningful and not just informational. In your action picture of the weekly study, so rather than saying something like Raul and Amando from our study group last week, write Raul and Amando encouraging each other in the word. It ties in that impact so beautifully.
Yeah, another great media piece to include are videos. There are so many creative things that you can do with videos to connect partners to the work. You can introduce a new friend with a 15-second interview. You can give someone a quick peek into a language learning class. I love, just scanning a group of kids yelling, thank you, as they hold the gifts that people sent over. So many things that you can do that are quick and easy and super simple. With most, if not all email services, you can't embed a video directly into the email, but you can embed a video thumbnail or that image of the video with a little play button you click on. That thumbnail is still way better than just having a link to the video because it adds that visual. If you don't know how to do this, Google it. That's usually what I do. There are a lot of how-to tutorials, videos, articles online that can show you how to do that for your specific platform. Be sure to also include a caption on the thumbnail or some kind of header so they know what the video is about. And no matter what the video is, if at all possible, please try to limit it to 2 minutes. Experience has taught us that if a video is longer than 2 minutes, people are more likely to take the, oh, I'll watch that later approach. And as we mentioned, most of them aren't going to get around to it. So try to keep it as short as possible. Another thing that you want to do is express gratitude for their partnership. Now, this point is usually pretty obvious, but what happens too often is we thank them, but then we remind them that we're the ones really doing the work. For example, thank you for your partnership in reaching students for the Sun. I couldn't be doing this without you, right? Bringing back in the focus around me. It starts with connecting them, but it just moves right back to me. So how can we rephrase that so it just highlights their part? Well, here are some examples. Your partnership is reaching Harvard students with the truth that only the Sun can satisfy our craving for genuine love. We're so grateful for you. Connect to the impact and then show your gratitude. Keep it simple. Another example, the Father's Hand is working in the local sports camps, and it's no coincidence your uplifting thoughts are paving the way for future generations to know the love of the Sun. Strong impact right there. And then we just end with, thank you for your partnership. We don't have to remind people that we're the ones there. We all already know that. But what's often overlooked is how important they are. And so it really takes us being very intentional to communicate that over and over and over. The next thing is to keep it short and simple. People are busy, so make sure they can get the information they need from your newsletter quickly and easily. From a desktop, we should be able to read it in just a couple of scrolls or less. But what if it's been a busy month? There's so much to share. Wonderful. Save it for another newsletter. either your next one, or maybe you send an extra one in between, kind of increase the frequency. That is so much better than cramming it all into one, because the reality is most of it isn't going to get read if it's too long. So if you continue to see that kind of frenzy of activity month after month, consider, one, increasing your newsletter, or better yet, let social media be your main outlet for getting that information out. But keep your newsletters really simple, no matter what's going on. Focus on one or two things. Okay, the next thing, keep buttons engaging. It's really typical to see buttons that say give now or donate. That's not terrible, but what difference would it make if those buttons were tied to something more impactful, like click here to build laborers, or change a child's future, provide a book? Consider making your button a different call to action each month instead of just the same stagnant donate language, because then it also stands out more. When that's changing, they know there's a button there, but they are being reminded of exactly what it is that they are giving towards and what they're participating in. So think about, how can I rephrase this to help them see the impact? And lastly, add the organization's logo. If you're working with an organization, if you can, sometimes you can't, have that connection, but if you're working with an organization or multiple organizations, include their logos. These organizations can give you credibility and also make a connection with people who've heard of them before, right? When I'm looking at a newsletter and I see, a team logo, I'm like, oh, they work with team. So it just has that one little extra piece of connection. So be sure that that's listed somewhere in your newsletter.
Yeah, so now that you know what to do, let's take a look at things that should be in the content don't section. And you'll probably be thankful that you're not on camera right now, so we can't see you cringe as we list the things we've all definitely done in a newsletter at some point. To start, the last thing your newsletter should be is a business report or a recap of everything that has happened since your last newsletter. No one has time for that. The purpose of a newsletter should not be to keep people informed. It's to keep people engaged and connected to the impact. So again, if you have a lot going on, put it on social media the day it's actually happening instead of saving it for one letter. Next, stop apologizing at the beginning of a letter for not sending it sooner. Seriously, what message does that communicate to your partners? If anything, it creates a negative tone and sets the stage for mistrust. You're basically admitting that you are a poor steward. And the reality is, most people aren't getting your newsletter thinking, it's about time. They're actually just excited to see a newsletter, hopefully. So don't poison the well with a negative tone. You also want to stay away from group photos as much as possible. If there are too many people, then we can't see their faces. And people feel more connected to the people in the photo when it's just one or two people and they can clearly see their face. So practically speaking, if you're taking a picture of an event, zero in on just a couple people at the event instead of trying to get a snapshot of the whole room. And you don't have to include a funding update in every newsletter. The focus of these letters is to point them to the impact the Father is having through them, not to just track funding. So definitely be more selective in when and how you share funding information. We recommend sharing only when you hit a big milestone or when you're asking people to lift up a certain goal. And even in this, it could be a totally separate email, which would allow your newsletter to stay more focused on the impact and what's going on in your area. And then your fundraising goal can be completely separate from that. Don't send your letter as an attachment in an email. Data shows that the click-through rate goes way down because people don't want to make multiple clicks. So if they've clicked to open your email, don't make them click again to open your newsletter. Have it right there in the body of the email. And don't assume people remember who you're with, where you are, or what you are doing. Make sure this information is included in every newsletter. And ask yourself, if this is the first newsletter someone got, would they understand what's going on? Make sure it's clear every time. In addition to that, Don't add new language or programs before you have explained them. Once I received a newsletter from someone that had a new program listed in the signature line. And so I reached out to ask what that was about because I thought he was working with a different organization. And he shared that he was still working with that same organization, but they were starting a literacy movement too. And that was the name of the new initiative. And that's awesome. But instead of having an opportunity to introduce the new program and bring clarity to me and even celebration, his newsletter brought confusion. And you all know most people would not have reached out to get clarity. So what could have happened had I not taken the time to reach out is that we might have stopped partnering with him because of lack of understanding of what he was doing. So please don't let that happen to you. In every letter, a stranger should be able to learn who you are, where you are, and what you are doing.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, let's pause for some questions. As a reminder, there's a Q&A box. So if you have questions about anything that we're talking about or just related to newsletters, feel free to type your question in there. But yeah, Susie, what questions do we have so
We've
far?
got some great questions, Jenny. So the first question was, what should a first newsletter include? What does it look like before I start serving with my ministry? That was from Mayuko.
Okay, so we got two questions there, right? So the first one is, what should my first newsletter look like?
And before, it's pre-filled communication. What would I want to include with pre-filled?
Yeah, love that. Okay, I think both of us will probably have some good responses to this, but MaryAnne, do you want to start?
Yeah, I love to have a picture of either you or the family first, and basically telling who you are, what's like, what you look like, and what kind of a family you are, and then obviously where you're going. But I love to have like, for instance, if you're going to Mexico, have like a little cultural piece on Mexico, a picture. Even, I love the idea of even having like a recipe or something of some authentic dish, just something cultural that that's going around in your country that you're going to be serving in. And then obviously if it's pre-field, what your ministry is going to be doing, what you're hoping to, how you're hoping to serve in that country.
Yeah, definitely from the very first one, it should be an introduction of, here's who I am, here's the work that I'm going to be a part of, here's where that work is going to take place, so that people can walk away going, oh, did you know that Jenny is going to be in Vietnam working with university students? So like, you want to have really clear idea of, hey, this is the work that's happening. Any pre-field, that can be really tricky, where people are like, okay, I'm not in the field, like I don't have anything to talk about. But there's so much to talk about. For example, what's happening in that location? You're not there, but there's stuff happening already, right? So what is already happening? And start sharing those stories. So if you have a team that's there, asking if you can use some of their stories, getting permission to pass on, get on all of their newsletter lists, so that you are more familiar with what's happening. So if you do see something where you're like, wow, that's really powerful, just ask, hey, can I share this? So find out what's already happening. I love the cultural piece as well that MaryAnne mentioned. I had clients who were going to be part of a deaf ministry. And so their newsletter has a piece that's really educating people on the deaf community. Can you call them deaf? What about hard of hearing? And so they're just kind of educating people around what this looks like. And I love that, because I'm learning, through that experience, like, oh, okay, this is what that means. So the cultural aspect can be really fun.
Okay, I have another question. This is from Isabel. If you send out a MailChimp newsletter and you see that some people didn't open it, should you send it to those people again, or is this a bad idea?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I've actually had people do that, and it worked out pretty well. Like, they got more people to see the newsletter because they did miss it the first time around. So yeah, if you are paying that much attention, good job. But definitely you can resend it to the people who didn't open it as a reminder, and I think that works really well. You might have, one or two people unsubscribe if they don't like it, but they weren't reading it anyway, so it's fine.
Okay, I've got one more. Adair Evans asks, what do you do if you don't have those powerful stories because the area of service is not maybe in a poor section or doesn't have physical needs that make people visually able to see the condition of the area? You can't see spiritual needs. Let's, for example, witchcraft or, some spiritual dynamics taking place in the country. What do you do with that?
Yeah.
I love sharing what God is doing in my life with people. So during those times when you're not seeing a lot happening around you, we know that God's working anyway, right? Like he's always working, but sometimes there's not something to show for it, that we can see, that we can write about, that we can take a picture of. So I love writing about what God is doing in my life and in the life of my family and how he's working through us, in our country of service.
Yeah. And I would say reframe what a powerful story is. Because a powerful story doesn't mean one that blows people away because, it's what we call like sexy missions, right? Like, okay, well, there aren't like orphans starving or something like super dramatic. All of it is amazing, right? The Father is moving in all of it. So for example, I had a conversation with my neighbor in Vietnamese, like to like an emotional level. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Right. So like that was a story that I could share it still communicated impact, even though some people may not think that was a big deal. I know how much of a big deal that is because I know how hard it was for me to learn that language and then to be able to start connecting with my neighbors. I mean, that's the foundation, right, for being able to share the good news. And so if you're not there, so let's kind of take a step back. Like if you're not even on the field yet and you're like, okay, I really don't have these stories. Again, if there's already a team there, there are stories. And start with asking, what is the Father doing? Where do you see the Father at work? What is the Father teaching you? Okay, so again, maybe you're like, yeah, I don't know what the Father's doing. I'm not seeing anything on the outside. What MaryAnne said, okay, go inside. What is the Father teaching me? Well, he's teaching me that I have control issues. Okay, great. Let's tell a story about that. That for me, I'm like, I think I had 3 different things on rest. Like how many times does he have to teach me about rest? And still, I literally have a book called Rest right next to me. So start with asking, what is the Father doing? And follow the trail from there. Yeah, what else?
All right, let's see, a couple other ones. Those were the main ones. I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think of any. There was just one about the link, and we'll put the new link in. Somebody was having problems with our newsletter link, but that was it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so if you'll just mark whether those were answered or not, like answered live or.
So I've got one more, Jenny. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Do you know how to share a WordPress newsletter in an email so it's not attached as a separate link?
I don't, but I bet Google does. Because yeah, that is something. If you can get away from it being just like open up the email, click here, that just deters a lot of people. So, but yeah, I would just Google it because I guarantee you there's some sort of video tutorial or article that will walk you step by step through it.
Here's another one. I'm going to throw it out. If you rephrase who you are, what you're doing in every letter, will this get repetitive? And how do you do this well? So it's sort of sharing what the focus of your ministry is.
Yeah, I think it's if you can have like a mission statement or a vision statement that's just repeated on a regular basis, it's nearly impossible to be too repetitive when you're focusing on the impact. Yeah, because people will forget over and over and over. So when they read it, most of the time it's like they're reading it for the first time. So it's really hard to be too repetitive in that sense when it's just, like have kind of that tagline. that you're repeating. MaryAnne, any thoughts from you?
No, you covered it.
Yeah.
Okay, one more. Should you address each recipient by name in the email? Can this be automatically done when sending emails to all of your supporters?
It can be automatically done, definitely through MailChimp. I'm sure other platforms do the same, but you can have it where you just have like first name. And I think that's a wonderful personal touch. Even though I know it's automated, maybe it's just the arrogance in me, but I just like seeing my name. I don't know. I think it's a nice personal touch.
Okay, Michelle asks, what's a good frequency to communicate?
Good segue into our next section, because we're about to talk about that. So let's jump into our final poll question. How often do you send some kind of newsletter? So if you have, a monthly email and a quarterly physical letter that goes out, okay, what does that look like? All right, so every, at least at least monthly, something's happening. So weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. If you're bold enough to admit it's been 18 months since you sent your last one, go for it. This is a safe space. So how often are you sending some kind of newsletter? Okay, so it looks like mostly monthly is coming through. Every other month. Yep. Not enough. Yep. Amen, Steve. I think probably most of us feel that way.
Annual report.
Yep. Annual report's great. Yeah, I love the annual report. I enjoyed doing that as well myself, on top of the others, like you have, I think is really good. Okay, so a really important part of any communication, no matter what your frequency is to keep it consistent. If people get your newsletter and it's been so long since they received the last one, they can barely remember you, it's likely going to be at the bottom of their reading list, right? But consistent communication gets a consistent audience. It's important to get the right frequency so that it's regular enough, you're staying in people's minds, but it's not so frequent that it's annoying. I'm sure we've all have experiences, people. 1 to 2 times a month is recommended for an email newsletter. So 1 to 2 times a month for an email newsletter is our recommendation. And anywhere from monthly to quarterly is acceptable for a physical newsletter. So as frequently as once a quarter, a physical newsletter is still a good frequency. Some people send weekly updates to special groups like an intercessory group. This is perfectly acceptable because it's a very focused email to a select group of people. A weekly newsletter, however, when it's going out to your entire list, and even more so if you're sharing multiple things in each one, is too frequent and people are likely to unsubscribe. I don't know about you guys, but there are times where it takes me a week to get to my emails. And so if I now have 2 or 3 of your newsletters in my inbox, I'm not going to read them. I'm probably just going to archive, like, okay, that's too much. So weekly, we don't recommend unless it's something very specific like an intercessory group that's just to a focused group of people. A consistent frequency, again, is so important. And so is the consistent feel of your newsletter. So what the look of it, the outline, the layout, the content, if you can have consistency in what that looks like, that's going to be better for your readers. Now, that doesn't mean never change it or don't add any variety from time to time, but that consistency helps your readers know what to expect, and it creates its own kind of comfort and ease for your reader when they know what to expect. Now, most of us struggle to stay consistent, which is why we suggest you make time every week to do some light planning. Pick a time each week, and if you've been on our webinars before, you've heard us say this. Have a weekly rhythm where you're focusing on ministry partnership development, and one of those things is your newsletters. But pick a time each week where you're thinking through what's happened that week that you might share in a future newsletter. Just kind of jot down some quick ideas so that you don't forget. But also what's coming up that you can prepare for so you can be sure to capture the right things to pass along to your partners. So if you know you have some sort of trip coming up or event, be thinking about, okay, make sure I have my camera, or, make sure I have whatever I need so that I can be capturing these events well. Part of this weekly plan can also be a great place to set deadlines. It's likely that your deadline for starting and sending a letter isn't going to be on the same day. You might have multiple deadlines, okay? One for gathering content, another one for laying it out or for writing the letter, and then another one for the actual day you want to send it or schedule it if you have a platform that does that. And I'm sure you've heard the cliche saying, perfection is the enemy of progress. And it really is. Even though we're encouraging you to be intentional with each of these steps, don't let obsessing over every little detail keep you from actually sending it. Remember, consistency is really important. So staying on a regular schedule is more important than waiting until you can send the elusive perfect newsletter. And if you find yourself struggling with this on a regular basis or ever, just pick one story of what the Father is doing, add one picture, and send it. It's simple, it's focused, and you're staying consistent. One last little nugget of information. Most people access the internet through a mobile device. So you should look at your newsletter on your own mobile device. Okay, how does it look? Does it look good? How many scrolls does it take you to read on the phone? We recommend having no more than 2 scrolls of solid text. Okay, so that means I have solid text, I'm scrolling again, solid text. At that point, I typically will then just fast scroll to go, dear heavens, how long is this? Okay, but if there are pictures broken up, that helps a lot. So make sure you don't just have a solid wall of text, 2 scrolls in a row. You want to break that up and try to stay under or around 4 scrolls. Okay, so at 4 scrolls, people are like, oh, okay, well, I read enough, and they're moving on. So you really, really want to keep it focused. Another thing to be mindful of while looking through that mobile device is that if you are using a template that has columns, on a desktop, it might look really nice and simple, but it's often on a mobile device going to stack those columns, making your newsletter appear really long. So again, look at it from your mobile device and go, okay, how does this look? What's the experience? Putting myself in the seat of the reader. Typically, whatever is at the top left of your whole page is going to be the first thing they see. So be really intentional about what is in that corner, because that is going to be the first thing they see, and we want it to be compelling. Hint, a funding update is not the most compelling thing to see right off the bat, unless it's 100%. So just be really mindful of what's in that corner.
Yes, definitely. So let's reflect on what we have experienced today, and go ahead and share in the chat what is something in this webinar that has been helpful to you. And I just see a question here from Steve. He says, should we always send a picture? I know my answer. What do you think, Jenny?
I mean, I'm going to say yes.
Me too. Me too.
I have received newsletters that didn't have a picture, but it still had like some kind of banner, some kind of graphic to capture my attention. Or if it's just going to be text, I mean, you get like 2 sentences, So yeah, I would say typically with a newsletter, you're gonna want to have some kind of image.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be necessarily an image of the ministry work that you're doing necessarily. Right. It doesn't have to be it can even be a stock photo of your country, or just something to make it look interesting. So I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, go ahead and share what is something in this webinar that has been helpful for you. Go ahead and share that in the chat. And as we mentioned earlier, for those of you who have not experienced a coaching session with Tailored, we are offering a free session to get feedback on an existing newsletter. So all you have to do is click on the link in the chat and fill out the form and upload your newsletter. And then we will reach out soon to set up a session with you.
Jenny, if you would put that link in the chat, that would be awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. And then once we've answered a question, if you can click done, and it'll move it out of that window. I did want to get to, and just remind you guys, we have time left, so we're going to keep answering questions. So while you're also simultaneously, you know, kind of listing what's been helpful for you, if you have any other questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A box. But I like that the banner, a lot of you are putting, you know, like having a banner. I like that because that's such a simple one, but it really is helpful. My in-laws work with YWAM, and they have a banner that it's like a world map kind of thing, but every year they change the color. And so they kind of have like a theme. So it's like, okay, you know, 2020 surely is black, good heavens. But they kind of have a theme every year. So it's still that consistent look, right? But we kind of are freshening it up a little bit with the color change. So I like how they do that.
Couple more questions. What's the best time of day for the recipient to receive a newsletter? For example, when I write my newsletters, most of my partners are sound asleep. Is it better for me to schedule it to be sent in the morning as they're having their coffee?
Yes. So mornings are great. If you notice, a lot of people who have like subscriptions or newsletters, it's like 6 a.m., you know, they're getting sent. So they're trying to get in that first thing in the morning. I would say that that's definitely a really good time. What's interesting is there's also like Tuesdays and Wednesdays, there's data that shows those are actually the best days to send emails, because people are like, Monday is the work day, right? It started, they're just kind of focused on getting their work done. And then already on Tuesday, we're done with work, apparently. We're ready to read our personal emails. So that's something that I've seen, is that Tuesdays and Wednesdays tend to be the best days to send an email newsletter. And then you'll see different data on time, but typically, yeah, like first thing in the morning, I've seen 10 a.m. is also a nice time. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that, MaryAnne?
No, I fully, that's what I would have said.
Yeah. I do want to get back though, before we jump into questions, and just kind of seeing, you know, MaryAnne maybe grabbing some other things from what's been helpful for people.
Okay, I see. It was helpful to be reminded about how good newsletters should look. So the aesthetic of it, yeah, they need to look pretty, or, you know, they need to look good, attractive even. Check your newsletter on your phone. Yep. That is something that a lot of people maybe don't do, and then they realize that heads are cut off in certain pictures when it's on the phone, you know. That's not good. I love this one. Make it about God and not about what supporters are enabling me to do.
Yes.
Just so good.
And honestly, that one question is so helpful. Like, that's helped me so many times when I've sat down and needed to write something. I'm just like, oh, especially when it's like, oh, what is even happening? Like, what do I even know? Like, who cares? You know what I have to say? And then just kind of reframing to go, okay, I have an opportunity here to minister to people. I have an opportunity to connect people to work that is happening that they may never get to see with their own eyes. And so just pause and go, okay, Father, what do people need to hear right now? What do you have to say to them? Okay, what are you doing that I can communicate and highlight? Hey, the Father is at work, and here's how I know. Or here's what I believe. Because sometimes you're like, actually, I'm not sure the Father is at work. Like, I'm having a hard time seeing that, because it can be such a tough time. And so then going, okay, what do I believe? What truth do I believe about the Father? And maybe it's, what do I need to hear? You know, because so many times when people share what the Father is teaching them, it's encouraging and convicting for the rest of us who are reading it.
Yes.
And so share, you know, it's like there's always something that the Father wants people to hear and can encourage and bless people through. So don't feel like, again, you've got to have this whole report. It's like just one thing that you can share.
And oftentimes, just to piggyback on that, oftentimes because people who are serving overseas, and I know some of you are serving in the United States as well, but in that missionary or that cultural position is there's something different about that. There's something that the Father can teach you differently that your partners may not have gotten there yet. And it's really helpful to kind of just enlighten, just to share your heart with them and share what the Father is doing, because it's a different way. It's like a different aspect of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's jump into some questions again. I know we've got several. So Susie, what else we got?
Sure. So should you include a picture of your family in your newsletter?
I can go either way on that. Maybe like periodically make sure people remember what you look like. It doesn't hurt to, like, I'd say occasionally, have that, but I don't know that it necessarily has to be in every single one, but it could. Yeah, I feel pretty indifferent. MaryAnne, how about you?
Yeah, I love it. People are constantly asking me, like, they love to see the pictures of my kids. They want to see like how much they've grown, that kind of thing. So I know that people absolutely love seeing pictures, but maybe it's just my kids because they're amazing.
Because they're so cute.
That could be it.
Yeah, that's a good point though, because with kids, they do change so much. Actually, I posted a picture on Instagram of Sadie and my husband when he was leaving for the airport, and someone was like, "Oh, who is that?" I'm like, "That is Sadie." Like, that's my grown child.
Yeah.
Because she, at this point, it's like, okay, she's a woman now. So.
Okay, so I've got another really good question. I've heard not to ask for donations in writing form, always in person or video call. When can you ask for financial help in a newsletter?
Oh, yeah, I don't have a problem with asking in written form. It's not as effective. It's way more effective when you're in person or a video call, or when it's. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it in written form. You just need to be very intentional. You don't want it to be all the time that you're asking for things. But I think as long as it's really focused on what the money is going to do, not just a general like, oh, I need money, click here to support the ministry, but it's very specific on, when you give, here's the impact that it contributes to. Yeah, I think anytime is fine.
Okay, and then this last one is, I've heard, I think from you, about trying to deliver an email between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. This is what we aim for in our social media, but maybe I need to rethink the timing for the largest group of our partners.
Yeah, so social media is a bit different. Social media, I think they see that like afternoons. So that 10 to 2, I think, is a good window for social media, maybe even a little bit later. And you do need to think through the time zone of the people you're sending it to. And, obviously we've got people all over the place, but kind of where's the primary group, and think about their time zone, especially with platforms now that you can schedule things. You can schedule it for that prime time. Yeah. I did see, Susie, you'd asked about MailChimp and Epistle, using them together. I think it's fine to use them together, especially since Epistle has so much more of a social media feel, and their default is a weekly thing that goes out. It's very different than a newsletter. So I think you could use those in tandem and have Epistle go kind of doing your weekly updates, and then have a monthly newsletter going out as well, because they're structured so differently.
That's great. Those are the questions at this point. If you want to put, Jenny, in the chat how people can get their newsletter reviewed if they have never had a chance to talk to a coach, that'd be awesome. The link for that again.
Yeah, so this link, if it, for some reason, because there was someone who it didn't work for, I'm also going to put, Susie, can I put your email in there?
That'd be great.
Okay. So Susie is the one who does all of our free sessions, and she's going to be doing the newsletter reviews as well. So I went ahead and put her email in there. If the link isn't working for you, that form, you can email Susie. And you can, but we want to have your newsletter ahead of time. So if we don't get your newsletter, we're not going to schedule a session because we want to have that prep time. But share your newsletter with us. She's going to take a look and just schedule a call with you to walk through, hey, here are the parts that are really great. Here are some changes you could make to make it even better. So definitely take advantage of that. That's great free expert feedback that you can get. And Susie's amazing. So she's just great to talk to anyway. Okay, I'm going to scan chat real quick to see questions. You can also email, I'm putting Lindsay's email address in here. If you weren't able to catch the whole thing, feel free to email Lindsay and ask for a recording. But I will say now we are starting to put our recordings on YouTube. So before we weren't sharing our recordings, but now you can go to YouTube, search Tailored Fundraising, subscribe to that channel. We've got great videos on there, some tips, but also we are putting our webinar recordings on there as well. So if you miss it or you missed part of it, you can still email Lindsay to get that recording, or you can wait for it to come out on YouTube. So thank you guys so much for being with us. Please, please, please join future webinars. They are free. I am biased, but I think they're amazing. And we just love being able to encourage you guys and share tips on how you can continue to build your partnership team for the Father's glory. So thank you guys so much. Have a great day.